Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today on the channel we're going to talk about 10 must-hear 1980s power pop albums. I'm going to start off here with a classic from 1987. This band came from Northern California. They put out like 3 excellent records in the mid-80s, this one included. This is an absolute classic. It's a double album. It's kind of like their magnus opus, their white album of the 1980s. The band is called Game Theory. The album is called Lolita Nation. Came out in the fall of 1987. It's a double album. There's a lot of information on this album. But let me go over some of the fine tracks on here, okay? Starting off with, I believe was the single. Didn't get a lot of airplay on college radio. Didn't get a lot of video airplay on the alternative. I guess it was called 120 Minutes on MTV. Barely saw it on there, but it should have been a huge hit. The song's called The Real Sheila. Pull that up on YouTube. Fantastic track. There's another one on here called We Love You, Carol and Allison. There's some really cool slow piano-driven tunes like Andy in 10 Years. Really good mid-tempo tracks on here called like Nothing New. Side 3 is where it gets really strange and kind of experimental, but it's definitely worth a listen. Side 4 only has 3 tracks. The last track is one of the most beautiful tracks the late Scott Miller ever wrote or produced. The track is called Together Now, Very Minor. Really, really gorgeous track. Just a real headphone listen at night. It really has a lot of elements of the White Album. I mean, it doesn't sound like the White Album, but it has an experimentation, just songs going into songs, little bits and particles and bits and all that. Just a fantastic record. And this was coming off the heels of another really supreme album from 1986, their previous album called The Big Shot Chronicles. Check that one out as well. I think that might be my all-time favorite. I'm highlighting this one because I've never featured it before in a video. And it's really a great classic, a double album from the 1980s, and a great power pop record. And it also features just a lot of different styles too. Along with the power pop, you've got neo-psychedelia, a little bit of garage rock. You've got some real moody pieces on here. So it's really all over the map, but power pop is kind of the main thing here that we're looking for. So Lolita Nation from Game Theory from 1987. Check it out. It's fantastic. How about 1981's debut from the LA's band, the Plimsouls? And the Plimsouls had a huge hit in 1981 called Million Miles Away. I believe it was in the film Valley Girl. It got a lot of airplay on alternative radio. This is a fantastic record featuring Peter Case, the main songwriter. He went on after the Plimsouls to a very kind of a low-key solo career. Some of the best tracks on here, though. 0 Hour is fantastic. There's a track called Now. Sometimes they employ a little bit of like a little bit of rhythm and blues, kind of horn section on some of these tracks. I Want You Got, I want What You Got, Nickels and Dimes, Everything Starts. Everything on here is really good. It's just a great solid album. The Plimsouls debut album from 1981. From 1984, their best album. I don't think they ever put out a better album, and it's so freaking solid. It's the Bengals, All Over the Place. This is how I first discovered the Bengals. When I used to go to this record store called Moby Disc, back in the day, back in the 80s, they would feature just a lot of promo copies in their used section. So I was able to get this promo copy, and I never heard them before, the Bengals. And that first track on here just blew me away. Hero Takes a Fall, so great. They do a version of the Merry-Go-Round, that band from LA from the 60s. They do a version of their hit Live. Really good version on here. Other tracks on here are really cool, called Going Down to Liverpool. I think Katrina and the Waves did a version of that. He's Got a Secret, Silent Treatment. I think this is the Bengals at their finest before they became all MTV'd and corporate, and they made Susanna Hoffs into a sex symbol. Here they are as a kind of a garage rock power pop band, and they're at their best. So the Bengals from 1984, All Over the Place, fantastic record. Here's an album, a personal favorite, an all-time personal favorite of mine. I saw this band at the Roxy in 1980. I also saw this particular band open for Thin Lizzy at the Santa Monica Civic in 1980. This is an absolute 5-star album. No one talks about it. I've talked about it a little bit on the channel over the past couple of years. This is a solid record from start to finish. It features the guitarist who was previously with the Motels, Dean Chamberlain. The album Code Blue, their debut album on Warner Brother Records. Now, there was a lot of promotion for this album when it came out. They thought, you know, with the Knack's success in LA that other bands like this would become a success. This is, in my opinion, better than the Knack album. It just features incredible hooks, great songwriting. There's just not a bad track on here. Some of the best tracks on here are like Whispered Touch, Modern Times, Hurt, Face to Face. I think got a little bit of airplay on K-Rock back in the day. Burning Bridges, Somebody Knows. It's kind of like an updated version of mid-period Who from the mid-60s. Kind of updated for the 1980s, the early 1980s. Highly suggest searching this out if you love power pop. This is just a real banger from start to finish. Every track's a winner. And it's a 3-piece, and it kicks ass. And there you go. Code Blue's debut album from 1980 on Warner Brother Records. Marshall Crenshaw, his debut from 1982. He initially played the lead of John Lennon in the initial Beatlemania that was on Broadway. Warner Brothers signed him. They thought he would be the next big thing. He never quite got off the ground. Some of these tracks got some airplay. Someday, Some Way is a cool track. There She Goes Again, She Can't Dance. It's all just very, very catchy power pop. I think after Pat Denizio from the Smithereens, the lead singer, songwriter, died, he took his place for a short while in the Smithereens. I don't know if he's still playing with the Smithereens, but for a while he was. I wish I'd seen that. That would have been interesting, but it's a fine album here from 1982, Marshall Crenshaw's debut album. And this, too, was on Warner Brothers. And fantastic stuff. So, another one is New York's The DBs. They had a few albums, too, in the mid-'80s that were cool. This is a really good one called Like This. Peter Holsapple, lead singer, guitarist. Chris Stamey was in this band at one time, but he's not on this album. Peter Holsapple would also go on to tour with REM. I remember seeing him play on REM's tour, the Life's Rich Pageant tour. He was like backing them up a little bit on guitar and keyboards. But another fine album here from 1984 by the DBs, and it's called Like This. Check this out. That's a good one. Now, I could pick any of their first 3 albums, so I'm going to pick this one from the Smithereens. This is a really kind of an overlooked Smithereens album, and I think it just kicks ass from start to finish. And it came out in 1988, and it's their second full-length album, Green Thoughts. Their first album is one of the greatest 80s albums, in my opinion. You know, power pop aside, it's just a fantastic record. This one is just has a little more power, a little more guts, a little more balls. And it's just one track after another is fantastic on this album. You've got Only a Memory, which got some airplay back in the day. House That We Used to Live In. There's some really cool ballads by Pat Denizio on here, like Especially for You. Elaine is a great track. Spellbound. The lead track, Green Thoughts. One of my favorites on here is called Drown in My Own Tears. This is a great, hard-hitting, hook-filled power pop album from 1988 from the Smithereens. I think I may have seen these guys like 6 times back in their prime. They were a great live band, real fun times. So again, Green Thoughts by the Smithereens from 1988, just a solid record coming off the heels of their debut, Especially for You. How about 1980's Seconds of Pleasure? Seconds of Pleasure by Rockpile, featuring Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe. This is a real winner as well. It's not everything is power pop on this album. There's definitely a little bit of hints of rockabilly and that kind of Dave Edmunds style. But man, there's some great tracks on here. Teacher, Teacher, When I Write the Book, Heart, Now and Always. Even in this album here, they show their schedule for fall 1980 where they're touring, which is really interesting to put on an album. It's not even a sticker. But yeah, just another fantastic power pop record. And I think this was maybe the only album that Rockpile put out. So Seconds of Pleasure from 1980, Rockpile on Columbia Records. I'm throwing this one in here because the Jam are definitely power pop. They weren't really punk. Maybe the first 2 albums were punk. This is one of my favorite albums of theirs. This came out in 1980. This is their album Sound Effects. A little bit of it is derivative. I mean, the song Start sounds very much like Taxman by the Beatles. It has that bass line. It has that guitar line. But there's some just absolute winners on here. Man in the Corner Shop, I think, is one of the best tracks or best songs that Paul Weller ever wrote. Another song on here called Boy About Town is fantastic. There's a song on here called That's Entertainment. which I'm sure you may have heard once or twice on alternative radio. Just a really great kind of change for the Jam. They were kind of going more into like a neo-psychedelic kind of phase right here, but still had the power pop. And this along with, what's the album that came before this? Setting Suns. This and Setting Suns are definitely my all-time favorite Jam records. This is a solid record from 1980. Sound effects by the Jam. I'm going to end this video with a couple of power pop EPs. And one of them is by a group called the 3 O'Clock. They were part of the Paisley Underground movement in LA in the 80s. And this is their EP from 1982 called Baroque Hoedown. There's 5 songs on here. And there is a track on here that is just killer called I Go Wild with this really infectious guitar line. Great chorus. The lead singer sounds like Davy Jones from the Monkees. Other tracks on here with A Cantaloupe Girlfriend, Marjorie Tells Me, Sorry, As Real As Real. Really cool little EP here. But if you ever want to pull up the track I Go Wild. It's just a killer power pop track. It'll just suck you right in. You can't get your head will not, it will never leave your head once you hear that particular track. I Go Wild. The EP is called Baroque Hoedown from the 3 O'Clock. And then last but not least, how about this EP by Cheap Trick from 1980 called Found All the Parts. There's 4 songs on here, plus a little bonus. And we have a track on here called, we have a couple of studio tracks, a couple of supposed live tracks. We have Day Tripper, which was recorded in the studio. They did a live version. They didn't like that version. It was recorded in the studio, and then there was audience applause applied to the studio version. Pretty good version of Day Tripper. Track called Can't Hold On. It's Such a Good Girl. Take Me, I'm Yours. But the highlight of this EP is this bonus single of the song Everything Works If You Let It, which I've mentioned before, which I think is one of the greatest power pop songs of all time. This is up there with like Big Star's September Girls. I mean, this is just an incredible hook-filled, kick-ass song. It was featured originally in the movie Roadie. It was kind of an ill-fated film from 1980. It didn't really go anywhere. It starred Meatloaf, Pat Benatar maybe. Maybe I'm wrong about Pat Benatar, but Meatloaf was the star. Just a really stupid film, but this track you must hear if you've never heard it. Everything Works If You Let It. It's on a lot of Cheap Trick compilations. The first time I ever heard it was on the Roadie movie, and I think it was in the opening credits. And I remember first hearing it going, who is it? I didn't even know it was Cheap Trick. I think this particular track, Everything Works If You Let It, stands up with some of their greatest tracks, like Surrender, Clock Strikes 10, you name it, Dream Police. I think this might be my favorite Cheap Trick song of all time. So if this is still available, this is one of those little mini EPs. It's called Found All the Parts. I think they did re-release it on CD with a few extra bonus tracks down the line, but well worth getting just for the bonus 45, Everything Works If You Let It. So those are some must-hear power pop albums from the 1980s. Do you have any more to throw into the comment section and let me know? As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.